All right, man, peace. So, brothers, a question is going to be asked over the course of this segment, not only by these two liberal black females here, but also the resident OG liberal black female from the U.S. Congress by the name of Maxine Waters. I did a video about her maybe about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, where she was making some outlandish statements back then. But to give her the benefit of the doubt and to give her credit, Maxine Waters is very consistent in a lot of her criticisms of whoever's president, not just the former president Donald Trump. So she is always someone to not hesitate in taking a chunk out of somebody's ass. So there's only so much that I can criticize her. Maxine Waters is almost like your old auntie or your grandmother. You pretty much let her slide with a lot of her crazy shit. It is what it is. But she's going to make a series of statements that are going to shed a bit of light when it comes to what transpired on the day of January the 6th, 2021, in the alleged insurrection at Capitol Hill, in which quote-unquote Trump supporters decided that they were going to attack Congress and many of the members of that quote-unquote august body, who they believe have sold out to globalist forces and have the full intention of destroying the fabric of America, or Americana per se. This has led to a lot of upheavals within the American government, and there's much more to come. But Maxine Waters is going to give her testimony. If you're going to ask me whether or not I believe that it was a quote-unquote inside job, yes, I do. The only question is, which side staged the inside job? Was it the Republicans or was it the Democrats? Because the Democrats actually have a lot more to gain and have gained a lot more from the so-called Trump insurrection than the Republicans ever will, including many of the members of Congress that were on the side of the insurrectionists. It doesn't matter. The understanding of how to utilize misdirection and false vulnerability are one of the touchstones of the art of war. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Welcome to another episode of On Stick to Sports. I'm Carrie Champion. That is Jamel Hill. What's up today, my girl?
Oh, my God. What is it? The news cycle is on steroids right now with all the lies, the blame game going on in the nation's capital.
Right, but what's new? There have been nothing but lies and blame game coming out of the nation's capital for the last couple of 100 years.
Between Democrats and Republicans. So we thought we should try to help you.
Democrats and Republicans have replaced the Bloods and the Crips as the biggest gang feud in America, by the way. And I'm surprised that not more people have noted this. They rep the red and the blue just like those two gangs do. And there have been a series of set trips that have gone on in the last year and change. Every time you have these so-called peaceful rallies or protests, people are getting killed. That's nothing but a set trip. When you see the Proud Boys and the Trump Tards or the Tea Party engage in altercations with Antifa and Black Lesbians Matter, those are just a series of gang sets going back and forth with each other, putting in work. That's all it is.
Help everybody, right? Navigate all this nonsense. So we have a new segment to break all of this down, and it's called
Truth and Consequences. That's what it's called.
Well, here's the problem. Most women are not creatures of truth, so I have a hard time with a segment by this title being presided over by two liberal black females.
So it's real easy.
Now, had your segment been named This Is How I Feel, then hey, have at it.
So I say a truth, Jay will say a truth. We'll offer up consequences that are based on the law or maybe a little bit of street justice, no?
Interesting. Carrie Champion says that, some of the offshoots or some of the consequences of the quote-unquote truths that she and Jamel Hill are going to speak might pertain unto street justice. Please keep that in mind whenever bad things happen to many of these females, that someone like a Carrie Champion is an advocate for quote-unquote street justice. We know what that means. That means people getting killed, people getting shot, people getting stabbed, or what have you. That's where American politics is going, by the way, especially since they've allowed this influx of emotional ass, toxically feminine women. Once again, the reason why it's become increasingly difficult for either side to communicate with one another in the last 4 years or so has not been just because of Donald Trump. It's really been because of the combination of Donald Trump and these toxically feminine congresswomen, media figures, pundits, so-called experts, talking heads, or what have you, who are constantly trying to go back and forth to see who can gain preeminence or supremacy. Trump, they view him as fighting for the old guard, what they call the patriarchy. Well, if they're trying to destroy the patriarchy, what is it that they're trying to install? They're either trying to install the divine masculine or the divine feminine, or the divine transgender. So if they're trying to remove the divine masculine, what are they trying to install?
I'm down with that.
All right, so let me begin with the everyday people.
Oh my goodness. This bro should have to pay the viewers to listen to her have to sing.
For the last week, the rioters are slowly being identified. Now, I don't know about you. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. I thought they would be folks I just would not know. I thought they would be people who were degenerates, if you will.
Oh, you mean like yourself? Or the members of the Black Lesbians Matter movement? Once again, these are two sides of the same coin. All they do is point fingers at one another, but they operate according to the same exact conventions. The super liberals, when they quote unquote protested, they burned things down, they destroyed property, they had no care for other people whatsoever. People died. But Kerry Champion, Jamel Hill did not care about that because supposedly these people were marching or protesting for quote unquote equality. On the flip side, you have the alleged Trump tards or so-called Caucasian conservatives who decided that they're not going to take it anymore. They're tired of being oppressed by the deep state and by the quote-unquote MSM, as they call it, and they decided that they were going to bum rush the Capitol building. Both two sides of the same coin, using the same tactics.
The more and more we learn about them, it's interesting because they are not. For instance, take a look at this guy with the antlers.
Yeah, I think that's what people think.
This person here is meant to represent the horned god, as most of you brothers know by now, or at least should know by now. I'll be dealing with him in a whole other video where I'll be evaluating the three-dimensional aspect of the quote-unquote storming of the Capitol building.
Is the person that would be storming the Capitol and thinking,
a guy in the antlers. Like, these are people you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe them. I would never come across them. Clutches pearls and purse if I see you walking down the street. But
no, you're not going to be clutching anything for right now. Right now is the time for the liberal black female to stay on television and talk her shit. But when all hell breaks loose, you're going to see the Constitution and the so-called integrity of the liberal black female. She's either going to forsake everything that she spouts and says and get down with the program and conform, or she's going to search out the nearest so-called black man to protect her once all that fake independence flies right out the window. You'll see.
that's not the case. I will tell you, these people were a mixture of business owners. There was a CEO from Chicago. There were real estate agents. There were some off-duty police officers, active and retired members of military.
Well, what do you expect? They spent the last year listening to people like yourself and other members of these incumbent black Marxist forces talk about how the police should be defunded and things of that nature. Of course, they took it personally. What do you expect? If you spend most of your time bad-mouthing your husband, can you be surprised if he no longer likes you? Can you be surprised if he files for divorce? Once again, this back and forth between the liberal and the so-called conservative is nothing but a toxic relationship. So the fact that Kerry Champion and Jamel Hill cannot understand why there are certain consequences and repercussions for the rhetoric that's been spewed for the last year, I won't say this beyond me, because they're just two-dimensional thinking women.
Let me not forget the Olympic gold medalist. So this is what I have to say to you. We have to face the truth about political violence. It isn't basically born out of economic depression, dealing with the marginalized. That's what they want you to believe. But the truth is this. Political violence often comes from this white power structure, this ideology. They're fighting to hold on so tight to that structure.
Well, that's what they're supposed to do. If you're in rulership or you're in power and you feel your power slipping away, won't you hold on to it? Kerry Champion, I'm sure that in many of your relationships, the death knell was when the man decided that he was going to stand up to you. Did you not harden your back and stiffen your chin and say, no, you're not going to take my power because I'm an independent woman? And that led to what? The dissolution of the relationship, right? The difference is you were okay with the separation, but when it comes to your interactions with the so-called Caucasian, you're not okay with separating for whatever reason. You're still trying to force this fake unity. Why is that? Is it because you're worried that one day you'll have to open your eyes in the morning and wake up and listen to what a black man has to say? because you know deep down that if and when that time of separation comes between the races, the so-called black man is not going to stand idly by and listen to your feminist rants anymore? Is it because you know that the liberal Caucasian man and woman act as a buffer between you and the so-called black man that you claim to support but really despise?
They want to let you know it belongs to them, and everyone, no matter who you are, from all walks of life, will join in.
All right, let me get to the consequence. So it turns out they could be facing up to 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing about it is that...
Now you know damn well, ain't none of that white trash going to do no damn 10 years in prison.
person they have to blame is their own cult leader, the president. Because back in June, Donald Trump signed an executive order to prosecute protesters who vandalized government property to the fullest extent of the law. Now, when Trump signed this, of course, he thought, oh, only the black people gonna pay for this, right there.
Lies. Another false pretense being spewed by Jemele Hill to once again try to substantiate this notion of this back and forth beef between Democrats and Republicans being about race. It's not about race, at least not primarily about race. But Jemele Hill knows that she has to talk about race and force this fake racial component into this conversation so that she can keep herself relevant. At the end of the day, the real beef that these ultra-conservative Caucasians have with the U.S. government is their belief that they're being sold over to China and that America is going to be converted into a communist society. And if you understand the history of communism and Marxism and how it works, one can understand how they can see the signs of that. Jemele Hill does not understand communism or Marxism or much of anything else other than how to get attention. So that's why the liberal black woman, once again, is a great distraction piece in this entire narrative. Her job is to get as many dim-witted so-called black men as possible to follow behind her and act as an infantry for the globalist, Marxist, so-called liberal Caucasians that are running the show behind the scenes. That's their job. But no, Donald Trump did not pass that so-called law to get to get so-called black people arrested. The reason why he drafted and passed that law was for Antifa, those white trash piece of shit Marxists from Northwest United States, from Seattle and Oregon and these other places, Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, these places where they're trying to act as if they're fighting for the people, but they're really fighting for anarchy. But because the woman is an agent of chaos herself, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, she wants to be confederate with them as opposed to being, aligned with a sense of order and structure. That's why people like Jemele Hill want to call so-called black men who have the germ of diplomacy within them and want to talk things out with Donald Trump or a governor that happens to be a Republican. She wants to call them a sellout. She wants no interaction or communication with the quote-unquote other side because she's already determined herself to be fully entrenched as a female OG of the Democratic Party. Why is that? Because the Democratic Party is going to promote feminism and LGBTQ, which are the main belief points of the liberal black woman, not race. All this race talk that Jemele Hill spews is phony. It's not real.
Are the ones that will be subjected to this kind of law and order, and those who tore down Confederate statues. And now look at here. Looks like his own law is going to send his supporters straight to jail. Law and order.
Let me tell you something. They need to be in jail for the maximum. You mentioned Donald Trump.
So does whoever did your damn weave. They need to be in jail for the maximum too. Whoever sold you that wig or that weave, whatever the fuck that is on top of your head, maybe you got that from the costume designer of The Lion King on Broadway. Who knows? Either way, they need to be incarcerated.
I gotta say, I thought this was an inside job, which leads us to our next truth. Mike.
Yes.
Isn't everything an inside job? But then again, oh wait, if a so-called black man says that he's a conspiracy theorist, but when the so-called black woman says that she's insightful.
Yes, this is a very uncomfortable truth right here. Elected official.
Wait a minute. Shouldn't this channel or Facebook or Instagram or wherever they decide to say that this was an inside job, shouldn't they fact check this? Because they fact check everything, right? These people are claiming that the storming of the Capitol building was an inside job. Do they have any proof of that yet? Shouldn't their statements be moderated? Shouldn't this episode be moderated on TV? There should be a little message underneath what Kerry Champion just said, in which Vice TV states explicitly, it has not been proven that the insurrection at the Capitol was an inside job. So right now, these statements are being fact-checked. Maybe Vice TV needs to hire the people at Snopes for Jemele Hill and Kerry Champion.
Conspired to harm their own congressional colleagues. Now take a look at this clip of newly elected West Virginia delegate Derek Evans, who had the the audacity to live stream his participation in the insurrection.
You know, brothers, look, don't get it twisted. The so-called Caucasian, they operate with a certain air of hubris. But it's just hilarious to me that this broad gets on TV and makes the type of statements that she makes when the so-called liberal black woman and these entitled Caucasians that they mock on this show, they operate out of the same handbook of entitlement.
And he was not alone. Speaking of co-conspirators, what about the state senator Doug Mastriano from Pennsylvania? Organized transportation for these thugs to go to the Capitol. And then there is Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, who opposed certifying and doubled down on his lies by trying to shift the blame. More than a dozen current and former GOP lawmakers participated in this insurrection in some form or fashion. So, Jay, listen, AOC delivered.
Are we sure that these GOP officials and congressmen or congresswomen were not sucked into a ruse themselves? Because once again, there's no doubt in my mind that this was an inside job. The only question is, was it an inside job executed by the right, the left, or both in tandem? Because there are a lot of very bad actors at play here. One of them being the person who's about to speak, AOC.
Delivered that truth serum that we are trying to do right now. She talked very eloquently about what happened on that day in the Capitol and whether or not she could actually trust her peers. Take a listen.
I myself did not even feel safe going to that extraction point because there were QAnon and white supremacist sympathizers and frankly white supremacist members of Congress in that extraction point who would
Now, that's a very interesting statement or allegation that she's making right here. And I'm not necessarily saying that I don't believe her per se, that there aren't white supremacist sympathizers amongst these congressmen and congresswomen. But if you're going to make a statement like that, you better drop some names, because now you're going to cast aspersions on every so-called Caucasian, especially on the side of the quote-unquote right. So if you know for a fact that there are congressmen and congresswomen who are white supremacist sympathizers or overt white supremacists, you should drop their names, particularly if you sincerely thought that your life was in danger. But I suspect that she never thought that her life was in danger. This is just a very opportune time to throw as many rocks as she can on her political adversaries and the ideology that they represent so that they can go into their next phase of the Marxist takeover. They've already demonized the so-called conservative. They've demonized Donald Trump. So now what's next? What's next is to cast themselves as the good guys so that when they bring in a lot of their reforms and their legal changes, the people are more apt to accept them until they realize the trap that they've fallen into.
Great opportunities to allow me to be heard.
Let's go back to the West.
Believe me, AOC, if they wanted to hurt you, you'd be dead already. If a lot of these people who you claim are white supremacists, members of militias, etc., if they really wanted you dead, you'd be dead already.
Virginia state legislator Derek Evans, who live streamed himself, needs to be. He's resigned. But this is an important point. Some big corporate political donors like Airbnb, Marriott, Nike, Google, they have pledged to stop providing funding to the elected officials who refuse to certify the presidential election. In other words, Republicans. So, you know, everybody's talking about unity now. We need to come together.
Well, Jemele Hill, you know just like how I know, or at least you should know, because you're older than me. Therefore, you should have more understanding than me when it comes to what this society has been like. There never has been unity, and there never will be. Unity is a catchphrase. It's a slogan for marketing that idiots like you subscribe to because you're a liberal. Now, this is a part of the hypocrisy of the liberal black female. They walk around with, graphic design T-shirts like what Jemele Hill has on with the head of Malcolm X on it. And that's easy to do because he's dead and gone, and he no longer can spread his spirit here on the earth. But those of us who studied Malcolm X know that he would not be an advocate of anything that Jemele Hill or Cari Champion stand for, because he was an outspoken proponent for the destruction of any acceptance of white liberalism, because he knew what it was actually about, which was just incrementally trying to destroy us by rubbing us on our back, acting as if they're comforting us, when really they're preparing to stab us in our back. If Malcolm X were alive today, or living today in this day and time, and had the same mind that he had 50 plus years ago, the first people that he would have called out were people like Jemele Hill and the overly empowered liberal black female. You know, one of the favorite tactics of the modern day liberal black female is to quote Malcolm X, where he says that the least protected person in America is the so-called black woman. Well, as usual, with the liberal black female being the two-dimensional thinker that she is, she forgets to mention that if you're going to quote Malcolm X and his assertions about the so-called black woman, you have to place them in proper context. He made those statements in the late 50s, early 1960s, prior to the feminist movement, and especially prior to the black feminist movement. If he was alive today, he would not make those same assertions. He'd be focusing on who he should be focusing on, that being the so-called black man. Because the so-called black woman is done. They're gone. Leave them alone. That's why I always make the comparison to the film Back to the Future Part 2. For those of you brothers who've seen it. When Doc Brown and Marty McFly are about to go back to 1955, and they brought Marty McFly's girlfriend with them from the future, and they leave her on the porch, and Marty says, "Hey, what about Jennifer?" And Doc says, "Don't worry about her. Once we correct the timeline, everything will transform around her." It's the same thing with the liberal black woman. Leave them alone. Stop wasting time with them. We have to work on ourselves. And once this society, this kingdom is translated over, the woman's going to turn to you and look at you in the same way that she looks at whoever else is in power. Women respect power. That's it.
Fuck that unity. You tried to overthrow the government. Got to go.
Well, question. What is it that the Black Lesbians Matter movement was trying to do? Never once have I heard any official or, high class or high level leader from the Black Lesbians Matter movement claim that they wanted equality. I've heard them claim that they wanted to see the destruction of the U.S. government, the destruction of this entire system. That's what they've stated. I've never heard any of the leadership of the Black Lesbians Matter movement claim to want equality. I've heard them say that they want to have this entire system torn down. Once again, two sides of the same coin arguing back and forth. As above, so below. Light is dark, dark is light, up is down, down is up. That's how you know that these beefs are contrived.
Quite honestly, they are immediately in jail. The fact that they were able to walk away that day is still astonishing to me. These are the truth.
I think that there are a lot of things that are astonishing to you, Cari Champion. I think that you're permanently astonished.
Truths and consequences.
Now let's turn our attention to the traitor-in-chief. Yesterday, the House voted to impeach him again, making him the only president in our country's history to ever be impeached twice.
And that proves what, Jemele Hill? I see you leaning in towards the camera as if that's some confirmation that you were right about Donald Trump. All Donald Trump is a good actor. He's controlled opposition. That's it. Meant to make idiots like you believe that the left is correct. And you're going to be, you're going to take your downfall along with the leftists that you cling on to for dear life. There are going to be so many things that get revealed over these next 4 years. I just hope that brothers are able to maintain their mental stability over the course of these next 4 years and change. Because who knows, they might get reelected again after the next 4 years. But this is going to be a very transformative period. Already they're working very fast to just do the opposite of everything that Trump did. There's some things that I've heard about, supposedly Biden signed off on. I'm waiting for confirmation on that before I make a video on it. But the so-called black man's going to have to batten down the hatches.
And this leads us to our question of the week. With only 6 days left in his presidency, is the effort to impeach Trump too little and too late?
So, Jemele, I believe we have the perfect person for this. You call her Auntie Maxine. 15-term Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She's been on that impeachment.
15-term Congresswoman Maxine Waters. In order for you to stay in Congress for 15 years, you have to preside over a district of people who have no idea what's going on, and they're just voting based on cult of personality. And on top of that, you have to be doing certain things within that congressional realm to earn the favor of, your compatriots or your peers. So Maxine Waters, she has her hands in the dirt as well.
Since 2016, and she endured so much heat for going after him. Heat is what she actually brought yesterday.
I rise in support of impeaching again. It is reported that the President of the United States watched the invasion and seemingly enjoyed it. And
once again, they're trying to align Donald Trump with Nero of ancient Rome. Like how Nero watched Rome burn and he played the fiddle. That's what she's trying to make a correlation to in a surreptitious way, that Donald Trump, he just watched the Capitol building, get raided, and he stood there and laughed.
He is capable of starting a civil war. He must be impeached. He must be stopped.
Now listen to Maxine Waters. She said that Donald Trump is capable of starting a civil war. Well, if Donald Trump is capable of starting a civil war, what you're saying is that his following is so powerful that the people who believe in him have to be controlled, that they have to be manipulated in some way. So what you're confirming is that it would actually be someone like you who's willing to start a civil war, because those people are not going to be controlled. Period.
Now,
Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm delighted to be on the show.
Congresswoman Waters, thank you so much for being here. Is it too late to call for impeachment of Donald Trump?
Well, yes, it is late. However, let me tell you why it's important to.
It's important to do because of what Donald Trump represents. What he represents is unrepentant masculine energy, and that has to be broken. He has to be an end sample for that, for what's going to happen over the next 4 to 10 years to any man who tries to stand up against the prominence or the advancing of the divine feminine and the divine transgender. That's the only reason why they want to keep attacking Donald Trump. And that's the reason why they're going to try to make this next impeachment official.
It's important to do just as it was important for us after they invaded the Capitol to get back to work. Now that was important in sending a message to the people that we're not going to back down, that we're not going to be intimidated, that we're going to keep going with the work. And that's what this impeachment really turns out to be, a message that you are dishonorable and you deserve to, be impeached. We're going to go after accountability no matter how late it is.
And of course, they're going to flash to Nancy Pelosi. Once again, Pelosi and Kamala Harris are going to be the real people running the country for the next 4 years. Not sleepy Joe Biden. That motherfucker forgets what his last name is. I mean, come on, man. And if you brothers notice, I'll be covering this in another video, but if you brothers notice, when he was signing all of those executive orders, he had on a purple suit and a purple and gold tie. I did a series on the concept of the purple and gold and what it represents, that being the Canaanite religion. That's why I try to constantly reinforce within you brothers what this society is run based in, that being the worship of Baal, the horned god of Canaan, known in ancient Kemet as Asar or Osiris. And his horned manifestation in Kemet, one of his names was the Nevis bull, spelled M as in Michael, Nevis. Zeus was also likened unto a bull, as was the Bacchus, because it's all talking about the same entity. You understand? That's who they worship. When they bow down the knee, they're bowing down the knee to Baal.
So what's it going to take for all of these Republicans who have stood with him for so long to finally get off this very dangerous train wreck of a bandwagon?
I don't know. Some of them said they're frightened.
As they should be. Because they're getting watched. Believe me, when a lot of these Trump supporters look at these other so-called Republican delegates and representatives, congressmen, congresswomen, etc., they look at them as actors. They look at them as people who sold out to the quote-unquote deep state. They truly believe that Trump is a man of the people. They believe that. How true that is or not, who knows? But the thing about Trump is that his character development was excellent, because the first thing that he did was attack many of the philosophies that seem to truly bother the white trash of middle America, whether it be quota-based hiring or the over-empowerment of the woman, abortion rights, LGBTQ, things of that nature. Issues that bother other groups, by the way. It's not just the conservative Caucasians in middle America who Trump spoke to with a lot of his statements and his strong and resolute positions on various issues. It was other groups as well.
Afraid that their families could be harmed.
And they could. Believe me.
They could be harmed. I don't accept that.
Well, you better. Because Trump has a very strong following amongst these quote-unquote right-wing extremists. These Caucasians, they're not playing games. So I can understand why many of these Republicans, they're hesitant to join the collective. They don't want to be associated with the Democrats. And there are many people who are starting to figure out what the Democrats are actually about. That they're not about the people. They're really just about acting like they're for the people so that they could promote more Marxism and globalism. Because they're getting huge kickbacks under the table. The Democrats are. And certain Republicans also. So the Republicans know that if we appear to be aligning ourselves with the Democrats, it's possible that the people will figure out that we're doing the same thing as the Democrats are. The thing about Trump is that Trump's attitude is, look, I'm already a billionaire. I don't have to take any kickbacks. I'm here to serve you. At least that was his tagline. That was how he marketed himself. And there are a lot of Caucasians who believe that.
Not that I don't care that people might get harmed.
You don't. You don't care.
I don't accept it as an excuse, for an elected official.
I agree.
Elected by the people to represent. And if you're too afraid to do that, go home.
I agree.
Thing is this. Aside from the fear, racism is at the core of all of this.
Right, but I mean, that's always been the case. The black woman getting on TV and saying the word racism with all that hoarseness in her voice, that's not not convincing or not convincing people of shit that everybody knows.
Congresswoman Waters, before we let you go, I must ask this question.
Yes.
Do you feel
Where did you buy that wig? It's splendid.
that what happened on January 6th was an inside job?
Well, let me just tell you quickly that I went to our Democratic caucus a few days before the insurrection, and I said, I think we need to be concerned about security. What's the security plan? How's it going to work? And so what happened was they had the chief of police call me, and I spent an hour with the chief of police.
And that man didn't listen to not one word you were talking about. Not one. While you were running your damn mouth, that man was watching porn on his laptop and making bets on the football game. That's all that man was doing. That man was like, yes, ma'am. Yeah, we have everything covered. We're going to have security next to every exit. Anything else?
I asked him about keeping the plaza clear. I asked him about blocking off the top of the hill in front of our office buildings. I asked him whether or not they were going to have a perimeter that was going to be adequate to keep them, from getting, up, near the Capitol and near our office buildings. And he assured me that they had it taken care of.
And as soon as he hung up, he said, Hail Hydra.
And so when you asked me if there was anybody complicit in all of this, the more I look at it and the more I hear and the more I think about some of the signs of it, I do think that this is going to be a significant part of the investigation. Not only I want them to start with the police chief, who either lied to me, was incompetent, or complicit. I want them...
Or all three.
Take the stories from members of Congress who saw people, as one said, doing reconnaissance in our buildings.
Of course, please understand that there's a heavy contingent of ardent Trump supporters who are former military, and many former military joined the police force, and they're professionally trained. They know how to scale buildings, and they know how to utilize recon to plot and plan how they're going to attack their foe or their opponent or what have you.
The day before. And so we're going to find out who may have been involved. Many people are saying it's an inside job. And I want to tell you, when I talked to my grandkids, one of whom had worked in Washington, D.C., he said, Grandma, I want to tell you, inside job. Inside job. So sometimes the youngins have a lot of foresight,
And Maxine Waters don't give a shit. She's like, I'm 81. I've already had all the dick I'm gonna get, and I've already signed all the bills I'm gonna sign. If they gonna come and snipe me, come get me. My wig is bulletproof anyway, bitch.
And so we're going to pay attention. We're going to investigate deeply.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters, thank you for gracing us with your legendary presence.
Thank you so much.
It is such an honor to have you on Won't Stick to Sports with Carrie and Jamel. Thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm just having a great time talking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Maxine Waters is funny.
We can keep you all day.
We good.
We know you have a schedule.
We already know in these streets too.
Yeah.
Protect Auntie Maxine at all costs. We already know. We got your back.
Oh, bitch, please. You ain't got nothing back. Looking like a damn trout out of water. Jamel Hill with that thick-ass neck of hers talking about we gonna protect you at all costs. Only thing you gonna protect is your paycheck with your lying ass.
We'll be right back.
But anyway, brothers, that's basically it on that. It's a peace.